Indonesia, the Center of World Civilization. By H.G. Sudin al. In the past decade, the issue of the existence and glory of the origin of the Indonesian nation, which was often referred to as the archipelago, has begun to emerge. That the archipelago is the center of world civilization starting from Atlantis, Lemuria and Sundaland has begun to be widely discussed. What's more, it is also concluded that the Aryan nation, which is often mentioned as the world's best nation, originates from the archipelago. This discourse coincided with the publication of the translation of two controversial books, Atlantis as Indonesia, Orizio Santos, 2009, and Eden in the East, Stephen Oppenheimer, 2010. The Indonesian nation should be grateful and proud of the publication of these two books. The hope is that there will be more academics and professors to conduct in-depth research on the existence of this Indonesian nation's ancestors. So far, the Indonesian nation has been taught history based on historical researchers from the colonial peoples and taught in elementary and secondary schools, also taught to history students, and which has resulted in historians and archaeology who are stuttering, because its history is ambiguous, made by the Dutch colonialists. So all history and archaeology that is circulating is history which is a lie, aimed at preventing Indonesia from having an identity. This issue says that the history we know today is the result of a conspiracy by the Dutch or other Western countries to shrink Indonesia. Conspiracy theorists argue that Indonesian history is false or a hoax using the thesis of Swedish author Uri Lina, who in 2004 wrote the controversial book, Architects of Deception: The Concealed History of Freemasonry. In this book, Uri Lina argues that Indonesian history is not original history because it has been bent or obscured by the Dutch colonialists. The conclusion is that there are three ways to weaken and colonize a country. 1. Blur the history. 2. Destroy the historical evidence so that it cannot be proven. 3. Disconnect them from their ancestors, saying that their ancestors were stupid and primitive. The anti-colonial French thinker, Frantz Fanon, describes how colonialism destroyed the culture and character of the colonized people, and as a result, the people in the colonized countries were left in intellectual confusion, losing their true identity. The attempt to dupe the Indonesian nation is the biggest crime the Dutch have against this nation Indonesia, among which is the writing and recording of its history. While this nation failed to reconstruct the history of its ancestors, stuttering, read the physical evidence that was clear before our eyes, was only clever to agree with the history that was written only based on the guess of the Dutch philologists. Leiden University Chancellor Karel Stolker said, there are 26,000 ancient manuscripts belonging to Indonesia in the Leiden Library. If arranged according to thickness, the length can reach 12 kilometers. The Leiden Library is the most comprehensive library about Indonesia in the world. The National Library of Indonesia alone only collects 10,300 ancient manuscripts. The Dutch here have succeeded in making us blind, who are the true ancestors of the Indonesian nation. There are many irregularities that compel us to withdraw all ancient documents belonging to our ancestors from the Netherlands, must study, revise the historical records of this Indonesian nation, reconstruct and rewrite them properly. And not just following all the records that were written based in the perspective of the Dutch colonial interpretation, which were written not according to the facts and wrote backwards, making it seem as if we were a nation of importers of other cultures. According to conspiracy theorists, that Indonesian history is made in the Netherlands, made by Freemasonry, by the Knights of Templar, by the Illuminati. These circles were also inspired by the controversial novel that stirred up Dan Brown's Fact and Fiction, The Da Vinci Code, or The Lost Symbol, which depicts that many of the conspiracies are working. Another proof is the opinion of the researcher, Santo Saba, a native Indonesian researcher who has researched and conducted direct historical exploration of the existence of the Borobudur site in central Java and the Muara Takus site in Kampar, Riau. He did not call the site a temple, because both sites were not Buddhist places of worship or Buddhism or Hinduism. He argues that the biggest mistake in writing Indonesian history is counting the beginning of the Saka year, which began in 78 AD, so that our history was eliminated before that year, which is easily referred to as animism and dynamism. This is evidenced by the existence of the basic relief figure of Borobudur, which is closed on panel number 43, depicting a building with a typical archipelago roof. The inscription on the edge of the frame reads, Mahetsakya. The word, Mahachakya, means great power, or the people who have great power. Kakya, Or Kaka, Saka, Aryan. These are our ancestors in the Indonesian archipelago, scattered hundreds of inscriptions with the date of Kaka, Saka. These, Saka, were the ones who conquered King Salivahana in AD 78. This proves that the Saka people existed long before 78 AD. Mahachakya, Kakya, Shitya, Saka, Aryan were the ancestors of the nation in the archipelago or Indonesia who had advanced first. The biggest contribution of the Saka or Aryans to civilization is the introduction of the concept of Dharma. This is the concept of the teachings of the archipelago's ancestors, which are depicted in Borobudur, with the literary text of the word Kusaladharmabhahana, starting in Svarnadvipa until now it is perfectly preserved in Bali. The ancestors of the Indonesian nation, the Brahman, was called by European historians as Brahmanism, before Veda was written down. They are the Saka of the Aryans, who brought their Dharmic original teachings outside the archipelago, which underlies the birth of Buddhism, Hinduism and Jainism in India. The original Indonesian teaching, Dharmic original, was brought outside the archipelago, starting from being studied in Svarnadvipa, Sumatra, to be precise in an area that was once a landmark place of learning and education, namely the Muara Takus site. This is an area or place visited by pilgrims or other Chinese and Asian students who come to study, record the teachings of our ancestors and then carry them and develop them in their respective countries, not carrying the teachings of Buddhism, and then spreading them to the archipelago. To that end, now the Indonesian people dig for themselves and research in depth about the ancestors of the Indonesian nation, which is the center of world civilization. All historical evidence is scattered and exists in this archipelago and spread from Sabang to Merauke. True Back History of Indonesia. By H.G. Sudan Adil. The author is the chairperson of the FKMI Indonesian Muslim Communication Forum. Bogor, the 28th of March 2021. By Santo Saba.